The reading I chose to focus on is Chapter 5 of Noll's work, America's God, from Jonathan Edwards to Abraham Lincoln. He presents a compelling argument that religion and republicanism were intertwined ideologies that were not only prevalent during the American Revolution, but also influenced the founding fathers in their writing of the United States Constitution. Under the subtitle The War with France, Noll states, New England's assault in 1745 upon the French fortress on Cape Breton Island prompted the first hints of what rapidly became the standard religious politics. In the crucible of imperial struggle, a number of colonial ministers from across the theological spectrum began to link the fate of genuine Christianity to hopes for the future of liberty. He specifically references a quote from Frederick Robert Tennant, who, quote, hailed the reduction of Cape Breton as the rescue of our civil and religious liberties from an enemy who unweariedly labors to rob us of our civil and religious liberties and bring us into the most wretched vassalage to arbitrary power and church tyranny, end quote. Tennant, Prince, Davies, and Mayhew all chimed in on the political and religious genres, but perhaps weren't quite aware of the strong influence they were having in steering the founders like a runaway freight train towards Christian republicanism. Under the subheading Christian Language on as Republican Disinfectant, Noll discusses the founders and the American Revolution. Thomas Paine published his work Common Sense at just the right time in America's journey towards independence. Quote, Tom Paine's Common Sense, the dramatic tract from 1776 that did so much to mobilize the colonial opinion against the British Crown, when Paine urged Pennsylvania's Quakers to live up to their religious principles and forsake conservative allegiance to the king. Under the same subtitle, Noll illustrates what a strong and irrevocable influence Paine had on the founding fathers when he shares the Continental Congress showed it had taken Paine's rhetorical lessons to heart. For example, when on 1 November 1777 it proclaimed a day of public thanks for the recent victory at Saratoga. Samuel Adams, who composed the resolution, was a more traditional believer than Tom Paine, which probably made it easier for him to use a fully orthodox theology in calling the patriots to prayer. The resolution began by reminding the colonists that it was, quote, the indispensable duty of all men to adore the superintending providence of Almighty God, to acknowledge with gratitude their obligation to Him for benefits received, and to implore such further blessings as they stand in need of, end quote. Other historians support Noll in his claim regarding Christian republicanism. Historian authors and editors Gish and Klinghardt, in their work Resistance to Tyrants, Obedience to God, Reason, Religion, and Republicanism at the American Founding State, quote, nevertheless, the Bible importantly and consistently served as a point of reference and a cultural primer on historical and political themes that were profoundly relevant to contemporary circumstances during the American Revolution and founding eras, end quote. Additionally, author Ellis Sandoz, in his work Republicanism, Religion, and the Soul of America, supports Noll's claim when he posits, quote, let us remember de Tocqueville's further observation that the men and women who colonized America, quote, brought a Christianity which I can only describe as democratic and republican. There is not a single religious doctrine hostile to democratic and republican institutions. It was religion that gave birth to America. One must never forget that. As much as I would thoroughly enjoy discussing this topic for hours, I will conclude this discussion with another most poignant statement from Noll's compelling work. Quote, the shape of political religious connections was also often related to personal experience. To observe the many such connections that were shaped by personal experience also moves the ideological story from the abstract to the concrete. American religious leaders with different theological convictions were pushed together by their support for the American Revolution towards a Christian Republican synthesis.